So last week I uploaded a video where I outlined 3 cool things you could do with C#. I ecstatically reopened an old project I stashed away for a day such as this. And oh, what I wouldn't give to go back to the time where I didn't know what was going to unfold. Welcome to Coding from the Car, and today we're talking about Linux, MariaDB, Raspberry Pi, and C#. So last week I talked about generating your own passwords. Well, I thought, hey, I really am terrible with passwords. Why not finally learn some SQL and see if I can get an app running, I thought. And hell, I could slap it on this Raspberry Pi I bought after watching too many Michael Reeves videos. But here's the thing. I have no clue how to use anything Linux-based. No worries. Yeah, this is big brain time, I thought. Yeah. So anyways, it took me like a week and a half to learn how to do this simple thing, and it made me happy, okay? Let's bake the pie, shall we? So the first thing we have to do is update the Pi. You could do this by typing sudo apt-get update. Your Pi should ask you to update automatically if it's your first boot. Even still, run this code to make sure. Let that finish downloading, and then we want to upgrade. Look, I thought update and upgrade were the same thing, but I digress. Type sudo apt upgrade and it should run the upgrade process. Next, we want to type sudo apt full upgrade. For reasons unknown, the article I read said to do so. And there you are. You should be all updated and upgraded. Next, type sudo apt-get install MariaDB-server. I know MySQL somewhat, but MariaDB is the next best thing. It will start the download, but stop to ask if it's okay to use disk space. Slap the Y button and let it do its thing. Once downloaded, you will have access to your MySQL/MariaDB database. To access it, type sudo mysql-u root. Boom, you're in. If you got here without trouble, then it's all uphill from here. Next, type in this code verbatim. This code opens the MariaDB configuration file. In the configuration file, we need to change the bind address. The bind address basically tells the server which IP address can access it. 127.0.0.1 means the computer the server is stored on, or localhost. All zeros means anyone, kind of. I'll talk about this later. Change it to all zeros and we can move on. Afterwards, we start the server by typing sudo systemctl restart mariadb.service. Next, we need the Raspberry Pi's IP address. This can be found by typing hostname -i in the console. You need this to find the Raspberry Pi that the server is on when you remote connect to it. After that, go back into MariaDB. The user root is only set up to be used by the localhost, so we need to set up a user that can be used on a different computer. Use this code to set up a user by replacing bear the coder with your preferred username, and change what comes after identified by into a password you can remember or is easy to test with. This can be deleted, edited, or completely redone later, so don't sweat it. Next, go into your Windows desktop to your MariaDB client. All that is required for MariaDB on Windows 10 is a download, link in the description. Now that everything is set up properly, remote access is easy. It's just like earlier when we accessed a server on the Raspberry Pi, but now we aren't on localhost. Meaning we can't use user root, and we have to specify server location, or MariaDB will default to the system-hosted server. Make sure the user and password is typed correctly, and it will let you in. Your code should look like this, but instead of bear the coder, it should be your username. Your IP address goes here, and your password goes here. I doubt the password has to be connected to the -p, but I learned it that way and was way too deep into it at this point to experiment. Now create a database and add some info, and I will talk about today's sponsor. I'm just kidding, I don't have a sponsor. Actually, it's the point of the episode where I call out people in the audience much smarter than me. I said earlier that setting the bind address to all zeros basically allows any computer to connect to your server. Well, that's only true for anyone with your login info, and they have to be logged onto your network. So that means remote access can only happen from within your home. So for some, this might defeat the purpose. I spent a week doing this only to read into why I couldn't connect at work. Turns out there's these things called private and public IP addresses. The private is assigned by your router, and the public is the bad one you don't want to leak on the internet. Turns out opening up your server to be accessed from anywhere is fine, but to truly access it from anywhere, you need to open up your Raspberry Pi to be accessed from anywhere. I hope you see the security flaw here. If you caught it, here's a cookie or something. So now you should have remote access, created a database, and have created a table with some info in it. I know I didn't talk about the SQL database and table stuff, but Google it. Seriously, a lot of programming is just being able to read and understand articles. Super helpful habit to get into. Start yourself a console application in Visual Studio and we'll work on the C# stuff. Like most good projects, we need a NuGet. Go to the Projects tab and click Manage NuGets or something, and browse for mysql.data. Download the NuGet and go back to the main file. You only need to be using system and mysql.data.mysql client. Next, we need to set up a string that essentially does the same as what we did in the MariaDB Windows client. Because just like before, we have to authenticate before having access. We do this with a MySQL connection variable that is instantiated with the connection string we established. Unfortunately, the format for the connection string is a bit different. Instead of -h, we use server, user instead of -u, and password instead of -p. Still very easy to understand, but input your information like I do here if you need a bit of help. You'll notice you'll also have to input the selected database as well. Do that if you haven't. Next, create a string that will represent the query you plan on using. Here I decided to select all the information on the table I created. With the connection and query variable out of the way, we need a variable that can push both to the server. We do this with a MySQL command, and it takes both variables as parameters. Now all required variables are set up. Now to get everything working. Begin the connection to the database by calling the open function on the MySQL connection variable we declared inside of a try catch. This seems redundant because the MySQL command variable references the MySQL connection variable, but it is required or it will throw an error. Next, and handiest of all, not unlike your creepy uncle, set up a MySQL data reader variable. This guy will contain all of the information returned from the database query. Normally, unusual arrays of information such as this is returned as an IEnumerable, but because this query is parsed into a class, we get to bypass the hassle of for-eaching an IEnumerable into standard workable variables. Now we call a while loop with the parameter of reader.read. Each recursion will read an entire row of table data, making each cell an element of an array. When the loop restarts, the array is restarted as well. Be sure to manage the data properly inside the loop before continuing. In my case, I only set up one column. Therefore, I only have one item in my array each time. Make sure you catch the exceptions or just let it crash. I'm not your dad, and we really aren't working on anything serious here. Lastly, make sure you close the reader after the while loop. Close the MySQL connection after the catch, and console read line so the console doesn't disappear. Also, I put this line in for some reason. You don't need it, I just think it was late. And here's the entire file. And when the program is ran, there it is. Thank you for watching or whatever. Do the YouTube things down below. Let me know in the comments how disappointed you are in my tutorials. Dislike me if you like TikTok. Okay, bye.